Hey everyone, Evan Jones with you here on the RPAC Rundown podcast. This week on the pod, we have Mark Searcey of High Plains Radio joining us. Of course, Mark has been doing radio play-by-play for many years in the area. We talked to him about broadcasting. Great conversation, some really good stuff in that interview with Mark. Also, magazines are out, so if you want a magazine, go to our social media pages and see where you can get your magazine in your area. Of course, again, a great edition of the magazine. A lot of good stuff in there. You know, the sports season is right around the corner. We're really excited about it for sure. Of course, the RPAC Rundown podcast is brought to you by a bunch of great sponsors like Arapahoe Rehab and Fitness, Cambridge Supermarket, Webb's Oilfield Service, Cambridge Rehab and Fitness, Onyx Native, and C+. And we have a lot of good stuff on the website, rpacrundown.com. A lot of great overtime content on there and all kinds of good stuff on the website. Be sure to check it out. We'll take a break. Be right back. Now joining us on the RPAC Rundown podcast is Mark Searcey of High Plains Radio. Well, Mark, we are right around the corner from sports season. We're not going to talk a ton about that stuff, but I want to talk to you about broadcasting. You've been doing broadcasting for many years. I used to do broadcasting too. And I think one of the things that's fun to talk about and show people is you don't just show up and call the games. Right. There's prep work, there's research, there's all kinds of things that you have to do to get ready for a game. But since we are right around the corner, how excited are you to get amped up for another sports season?
Yeah, I'm really excited for this upcoming sports season. I think we've got a lot of great teams, great athletes, and I'm excited to see what they can do this coming season. There's a lot of senior-laden teams out there, so I'm really expecting a lot of great things in all the sports. And yeah, I think it's going to be a fantastic year. We just came off a great year for the RPAC, and a lot of great teams and players and athletes as well. And so I'm looking forward to another great year and seeing what's going to transpire.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about your broadcasting career. How many years have you been doing broadcasting?
Sure. I've been doing broadcasting on the radio for 23 years. Mm-hmm. It's been an amazing adventure. I've met a lot of great people. I got to travel a lot of different locations, and it's just been a great avenue for me to be a part of.
Yeah. No, that's really awesome. So 23 years ago, let's talk some of the equipment that you're beginning with. Was that like phone call, or how did you used to do it back in the day? Because I started in 15, so I knew Comrex. That's all I really knew was a Comrex unit.
Yeah, that was one thing I was going to talk about if you didn't bring it up was technology. Yeah. So initially, back in the day, we had to do the phone line thing. And if the school didn't have a phone line, we'd have to get one put in with the phone company. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And we went from that, and as you said, kind of to a cell phone service with a box. That's kind of what we did next. And then kind of the Comrex now. And then now we're kind of moving to the internet on a laptop. You kind of use a program called CleanFeed is what I think several people are using. That's what we use. And it's just amazing how technology has evolved over the years in radio broadcasting.
Yeah. And of course, since moving back, when I've seen you at all the games and stuff, I asked him, like, do you run your own commercials? And you're like, yeah, I run the commercials. And for those of you wondering, I was too high maintenance. I didn't run my own commercials. I had someone else run those for me. But it's amazing how much multitasking goes into just a broadcast in general.
It does indeed. I was a little hesitant myself to start doing my own games with the commercials, like you said, but I've kind of learned to adapt, and it's kind of second nature now. But you definitely have to be on your A game because you have to do everything yourself there at the ball game.
Yeah. No, very cool. So, High Plains all 23 years, or what other places have you broadcast?
Yeah, I started out at Hometown Family Radio, and I mostly did games for Coyote Country. I did the area games for them, and then 13 years ago, I switched over to High Plains, and I've been doing games covering area teams on 103.9 The Hawk, and then when I do some Bison games, I'm over on KICX. So it's been a fun 23 years with those two radio groups, and a lot of great people at both stations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing the coverage that our area gets from our local media. It's really unique. And I know the kids recognize, I know the schools recognize it. It is pretty unique to see just the coverage that the kids get in our area.
Yeah, it is very cool. And I would say the camaraderie between all of our media people, radio, print, news, TV, your stuff as well, Evan. Everybody's very helpful. Hey, did you get that last touchdown? Who scored that last point? Everybody tries to help everybody out. And if you need a piece of equipment, they're really able to lend a hand. And so it's just a great environment to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So let's talk about, younger Mark, what made you want to be a broadcaster?
I really enjoyed growing up listening to like Frank White doing the Royals games, KRVN, those broadcasts. Keith Jackson, of course, college football. He was my idol, and I just loved what they did. And when I went to college, I actually went into sport management. And then when I moved back here, I was like, man, I'd love to get back into sports somehow. I grew up, doing all the sports when I was at Culbertson, and just thought, man, I want to get involved somehow in the sports arena somehow. So I was assistant football coach at Culbertson for 1 year, and then that was a great experience. And then Bob Elder asked me to do some refereeing, so I did varsity football for the first time.
All the when you're broadcasting, everything that's going on with the kid.
And I learned the umpire for a football game. You have to be on your head on a swivel because everybody's coming right at you. But that was a great experience. And then I thought, I'd like to try radio broadcasting. So I asked County Country if they needed somebody, and they said, yeah, we could use somebody in the fall for a color commentator. So I was able to do that, and then I eventually did the play-by-play for them later, and the rest is history.
And of course, your full-time job, you work at First Central Bank. So this is something that's, obviously for a lot of people, we get paid for what we do, but there is a labor of love to it.
Yes,
there really is. And let's talk about that, Mark. We were talking just off before we got on here. People just sometimes think you show up and call a game. There's lots of research that goes into it, hours of research. And of course you get to know the kids, so the research gets a little bit quicker and stuff, but just tell me about what's prep work like for you and stuff like that. Obviously I have a wide background playing in sports, coaching sports, refereeing sports, and obviously broadcasting, but what's research kind of like for you for each week?
Yeah. As you mentioned, it does get easier, and it's definitely a lot easier now than it used to be because I kind of have a database of all the area teams and stuff like that. So it's easy to draw from those. But each week, I try to see, of course, who our teams are. I'm going to be covering. I'll go to the NSA website, I get their schedule, maybe district standings, their records, who they've played, recently, who they're going to play. Rosters are always a big thing. If the AD and coach can get them to us, it's a lot better than it used to be, but still sometimes it can be a little tough. Max Preps is a huge resource. And so I just get all that information, and I always want to be as prepared as I can be for the broadcast, because, everybody's listening and they expect a quality product, and I want to give it to them. And if I have all that information for my broadcast, I feel like I can do a great job.
Yeah. And so now talking to you about, you've done both color commentary, being an analyst and stuff like that, and then also play-by-play. What do you enjoy more, the play-by-play or being an analyst?
They both are definitely unique. Initially, I was a little hesitant to do a play-by-play because I'm like, you got to be the guy that calls the action right away, and where the color guy kind of just build off and play off of what the play-by-play guy does. But yeah, I'd have to say play-by-play because you get to be right there with the action and get to call the games as they're going right then and there. I get a little passionate and hyped up a few times, so I do a little more of that when I'm doing play-by-play than color commentating probably. So
no, that's cool. It's always interesting to me because when you are an analyst, a lot of times you're not watching the ball every single play.
Right.
You're watching what else is happening, no matter what sport it is. Especially football, you're watching defensive alignments and stuff like that. So it is interesting. You have to be able to kind of just look at the game differently as an analyst.
Yes.
It's not everything that's happening. It's what else is going on over here. Why is this happening? What it leads to that. So yeah, that's super interesting. So you mentioned, a few broadcasters that, you mentioned Frank White and Keith Jackson and folks like that. Any other broadcasters that come to mind that kind of influenced you and people that you maybe pick up things from?
Yeah. I'd probably say, Rich Barnett. He's been around.
He's okay. Than me. Just kidding, Rich.
And now I'm working with him. But now I did. And Max Broderson did the Bison games. I always followed him in the area, and I always thought that they did a great job. They were very into the games and were exciting to listen to. And of course, Kent Pavelko for the Huskers. I love listening to him. And of course, he still does Husker basketball games now. But those type of people are really influenced how I try to do my broadcasts.
No, that's cool. That's very cool. Nebraska's had a lot of great broadcasters. You think about, obviously Greg Sharp, obviously awesome. The Kevin Kuglers of the world being from the state and things like that. Really fortunate to have some really good broadcasters. Yeah, you talked about prepping and stuff like that. You mentioned you're from the Culbertson area, the Hitchcock County area. I know you're unbiased. I know you are. But how is it difficult to draw that line, or how do you compartmentalize it and just be like, I gotta call the game?
It can be difficult at times, but I do just try to, as you say, compartmentalize, or just, call the play as I see it, and, give a shout out to the players that made the play, no matter what team they're on, because, I know a mom or a grandma or sibling is listening and they want to hear, how their kid did. And so I just try to compliment and be as positive as I can for both sides, especially if it's area teams. Now we get in the playoffs and do other things. I'm all for the home team, our home teams, and, a little more biased, but, as far as our area teams, it can be tough at times, but I definitely try to do the best I can.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll take a short break and we'll continue our conversation with Mark. You're listening to the RPAC Rundown Podcast. Welcome back to the RPAC Rundown Podcast. Of course, we have Mark Searcey here, 23 years as a broadcaster. I figured it was in that 20-year range. That's pretty impressive. That's awesome. So there's a lot of memories there with doing broadcasts for that long. I asked for one memorable, but I'm sure you got more than one. It's not fair for me to ask you for one, but what are some memorable broadcasts you've had throughout your career, Mark?
Yeah, there's been a lot of games, and, I figured you might ask me that question. So I was like, I got to be prepared here. And boy, I kept coming back to these. I couldn't just decide on one. If I had three games that really stood at the top of my head and top of my mind, and they're actually all three state championship games, but they all really, just because of the stakes and the drama in the games and the high level of play by all the teams in these games, I just felt these three kind of stood out. So if you don't mind, I'd like to
absolutely. Let's go through them. I love it.
We'll go back chronologically here. Back in 2022, the D2 State Football Championship in Lincoln, it was Howells Dodge and Hitchcock County. You probably remember those teams. They both had tremendous records. They were undefeated. They just steamrolled their opponents in the playoffs, and we were covering Hitchcock, of course, here. And I just kept thinking as they kept progressing, wow, is this team really that good? They're just, shellacking everybody, and they made it all the way to the finals. So well, I think they are that good. And we played in the Monday morning at Memorial Stadium, and getting to broadcast there was just a thrill.
It's like the holy grail for a broadcaster in our state, like to just have that opportunity.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah. And it was just a great morning, and the fans, Hitchcock County fans, were just down below us in the press box, and it was just a great atmosphere, a great game. Of course, Howells Dodge was a favorite. They'd won D1 the year before. Coach Spears always has great teams up there in Northeast Nebraska. Hitchcock was probably the underdog, but Coach Rath, he had a great group of kids with the Gaston brothers, Scott at tailback, Hisker, and Schuler at linebacker was a beast, and they just were a tremendous team. It was a great game. Hitchcock County was right with them the whole way. It was a great game down to the fourth quarter. Hitchcock County had a 4th and goal from the 1. I remember because it was right down below where we were at the press box. Scott got around the corner and he got pushed out of bounds, but he just reached across and they signaled touchdown. But that was the first year they had implemented review, and so we actually had a review in the championship game, and it was on that play, and we're like, oh, we're all holding our breath. Is that going to count? And we saw it on the jumbotron, and it sure looked like he got across before he went out, and they did count the touchdown, so they gave them a lead. And then they had a late stop against Howells Dodge. Time ran out, and Hitchcock County won 22-12. And being a Culbertson graduate, just kind of was a special place in my heart, even though it's Hitchcock County now, but still Culbertson's part of that. And that really meant a lot to me to be there for that game.
Yeah. No, that's a great one. That's a great one. Well, now what's the next one? Hit me with.
I'll go back to football again. A couple years earlier in 2020, DCS state championship game against Burwell. Of course, that was the year, if you remember, we had COVID, the fall.
Yep. I was still calling games in York at that time.
Okay.
So we Cross County was making a run a little bit throughout that year, but that was you tell the story. You tell the story, because they're host sites, so it's incredible atmosphere.
Exactly. Yeah. So and I'll kind of go back to the semifinals a little bit. We had heard rumors that maybe the championship games might not be in Memorial Stadium, and sure enough, after Dundee County won, we heard it's going to be played at the higher seat, as you mentioned. So we were going to Burwell, and that was a team that the Tigers had played the year before in the semifinals had lost. So we were excited for them to get back, and this is for the state championship. Burwell's packed. We didn't have any social distancing there in the press box.
That's so true. It's so true. That's funny.
But it was an electric atmosphere. DCS fans across the way, Burwell fans on this side. It was just an amazing atmosphere for the kids to be a part of. It was an amazing game. Plays made on both sides. Came down into the fourth quarter. The Tigers needed a touchdown, a 2-point conversion to tie. They go down with under a minute to go. They score, so they have to have the 2-point conversion. Wade Myers, he was so elusive at quarterback for the Tigers. Rolled out to left, eluded a couple tacklers, comes back to the right, throws in the end zone. Servando Diaz high points the ball, and 2-point conversions. Time ran out for Burwell, just a couple plays. So we go to overtime. Both teams score in overtime. We go to double overtime. DCS had the ball first. They scored a touchdown. And then, of course, Burwell had the football, and DCS defense played well, and then was 4th and goal from the 4, and they ran it to the near sideline. I think Krutzinger led the way, and a couple other guys. They stuffed them. It was over. Tigers win in double overtime.
Wow.
I'm trying to remember the score here real quick. I got to look at my notes. 42-36. Double overtime. But just a fantastic environment, and so happy for Coach Spargo and the kids to get that win. And it was one of the first state championships in the area, probably since Cambridge and McCook back in the early 2000s.
Yeah,
so
long time.
Really neat to be a part of that game as well.
Yeah, that was. I'll tell my story in 2020, we were covering Cross County. I can't remember how far they made it into the playoffs, but my former high school basketball coach, Jimmy Blex, just taken the AD job. And of course, I'm like, hey, you got room for us in the press box? He's like, I don't. I said, okay, so what's the deal? And he's just like, we'll put you in the stands. And I'm like, sounds great. And that was, Matt Dolch was my my analyst for that year, and I was like, get your coveralls, we're going to be in the stands. And it was still one of the best atmospheres. And if you come prepared, it doesn't matter how cold it is, you can make the most of the opportunity. You have the crowd noise is fantastic for a game like that if you're in the crowd. But yeah, that year in 2020 was so different, because I remember sitting there, and it had been, like you said, talks for kind of a while, like these games might not be at Memorial Stadium, they might put them at host sites. But yeah, it's awesome that Dundee County Stratton won the title that year. And you got one more for us, Mark.
More here. Back in 2017, Dundee County Stratton girls made the state championship for the second time in 3 years, and they were facing Guardian Angels Central Catholic. Coach Belke and Coach Studi, they had another great team that year. They were undefeated, getting to the Pinnacle Bank Arena, which was an amazing atmosphere and an environment for those girls to play in. Both those teams are just loaded. I mean, they just made plays back and forth the whole game. And again, we came down to the wire, 10 seconds left in the game. Guardian Angels had the basketball. They called timeout, set up a play. It was executed to perfection, except when they shot the ball, it just rolled off the rim. DCS got the rebound, had 1 second left. They called a timeout, threw it to half court, but didn't get anywhere. So we got overtime, another overtime. Like, oh boy, here we go. And both teams didn't score much in the first overtime. And it was amazing. We still talk about that to this day. The number of fouls that were not called. I mean, there wasn't a lot of fouls anyway. It was just great basketball. We weren't even in the bonus in overtime. It took to the second overtime before we got to, which I'm getting ahead of myself, but we went to the second overtime, and both teams, again, just left it all out on the court. Tigers were down 3 late in the game. Cami Porter, I believe, shot a 3 over here in the corner, just missed it, and Tigers lost 53-50 in double overtime, but never so proud of a losing effort than that game. The Tigers, they just played a tremendous basketball, and they just made their communities proud of, and our Southwest area, Nebraska, very proud of how they handled themselves, and just a tremendous game. Both teams left it all out there. I know everybody was exhausted. I know several of the players on both sides said, I don't think we could have made another overtime because we were just so tired from playing some great basketball that night. Or morning, I should say, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there was another one that, thinking about games that I had done in the past, Brandon Bennett and I in 2018, I think it was Overton was making a run in the playoffs. They went up to Mullen to play, and we called a game in like 10-degree weather on the scaffolding.
Yes, I got one of those we're talking about later.
just some of those, those situations. And let's talk about that.
Sure.
Doing high school sports, sometimes you get kicked outside because especially in the playoffs, you're going to have a lot of media personnel there. Is there any games that come to mind, and where were they at, and what kind of a location, what kind of vantage points did you have? Just tell me about those, Mark.
Or yeah, I've got a couple that I thought of immediately when you're asking me that question. The first one I definitely popped in my head was a few years ago, Southwest played Maxwell in a playoff game. And so I go up there like usual, talk to the AD and say, hey, I'm here for the playoff game for covering Southwest. Where do you want me to set up? And say points over here. And I was like, okay. And so I go down there and there was an assistant coach or somebody there said, yeah, we're going to put you here. And I'm like, okay, I don't see anything. And they're like, no, you're in here. And like, oh, so it was a pickup truck like they use for an auction. That's where I had to set up for the playoff game. So
Love it.
It was very unique, but actually it worked out okay. I was just high enough I could see over the players and stuff, so I could call the game. But that was very unique. Kind of playing off your game with the cold. And Coach Freeland always talk about this. The coldest game I've ever done and been a part of was this DCS North Central game, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. And it was up at North Central, which is in northeast Nebraska. Yeah, and it was probably 10 degrees, 15 degrees, and there was a wind out of the north like 15, 20 miles an hour, and they had us on a scaffolding scissor lift thing. And so we were up there, and I couldn't feel my toes after the first few minutes, and I didn't keep stats. I mean, I just trying to stay alive and call the game, and my teeth are probably chattering in the broadcast, but made it through. But yeah, those were definitely two unique places I had to call football games out.
Yeah, you learn some things the hard way for sure doing cold games. I always have a set of coveralls in my car at all time, and I always have hand warmers. I bet there's something in my backpack right now. I just always have those things with me. But no, it's especially football. You get the opportunity to be in some kind of unique situations and calling some games in some different spots. So, all right, big sports season coming up. We talked a little bit early, like how excited we are for the sports season. Let's talk the fall sports season. It's going to be some good football, going to be some good volleyball. What are some things you're kind of looking out for within the RPAC specifically, Mark?
Yeah. So I think a lot of our start with football. We've got a lot of teams, specifically I think in Cambridge, Hitchcock County, Dundee County, Stratton. They had a lot of great juniors last year. They got a lot of seniors coming back. Those coaches, I know, do a great job each and every year getting their kids prepared. I think they're going to have some fantastic seasons this year, and looking forward to see what they can do in the playoffs. Volleyball, Cambridge Southwest, Maywood Hay Center, the usual.
Yeah.
They always have great athletes. Alma, got to go down there. They're going to have a great team as well. So, yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing all these teams play. The RPAC tournament, for volleyball is just going to be tremendous. It always is every year on the West and the East. There's some great teams. DCS, I know, will have a good volleyball team as well, and just some great athletes. And just a lot of them are a year older, so I just expect a lot of great things, a lot of good leadership from the coaches and the players themselves. So, looking forward to seeing what can transpire for them this season.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thanks for coming down. You made the trip. A lot of times to do video calls. You said come down from McCook, so I appreciate that. Always good to have you down here. And of course, Mark and I were coworkers for a couple of years when I worked at First Central Bank, and I always enjoy sitting and visiting with you at games and seeing what you've been up to. So thanks a bunch for coming down, man. And we'll be seeing you in the fall. Okay.
Appreciate it, Evan. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, of course. That will do it for this week's episode of the podcast. Big thanks to Mark Searcey of High Plains Radio for joining us this week on the pod. Always great to catch up with him. Like we mentioned earlier, the Fall Preview magazine is on shelves. So go to our social media sites, and we have a graphic there where you can see where to pick up a magazine. So be sure to get yours for the fall sports season. Crazy to think that we are at that point, just a few weeks away from the fall sports season getting rolling. Also, be sure to go to rpacrundown.com. All kinds of great content there too, from our free stuff to our subscription-based stuff. We have a lot of good stuff. If you don't have an RPAC Rundown Overtime subscription, I encourage you to get one. A lot of good stuff there. $3 per month plus tax, or $30 per year plus tax. Super affordable for more coverage of the RPAC. Of course, the RPAC Rundown podcast is brought to you by a bunch of great sponsors like JBK Operating LLC, Scouts Recreation, Cross Diamond Cattle Company, Tri-Valley Medical Foundation, and Prairie Girl Candle Company. Thanks a bunch for tuning in. We will catch you later.